with us. So today we actually do have a line of exciting speakers sharing with them their industry knowledge on digital analytics. So let's just give the rest a few more minutes before we get the session started. All right, hi guys. Thanks for everyone joining us for this month edition of DAWS. So we just give the rest a few more minutes before we get started for today's session. All right, hi everyone. Welcome to our June edition of DAWS. So for today, we actually have in line 3 different very exciting sessions. So our first speaker will be from Meiro, and we will have Queen sharing with her more on a very exciting topic, followed by eClerx, where we will have our speaker Hari, followed by a demo session where we can actually see the different tech tools in action, and it will be shared by AK. All right, so maybe let me just give a quick introduction on what DAWS is all about. So DAWS, it really stands for Digital Analytics Wednesday session. And what we're actually a group of volunteers who come together to actually find speakers to actually share more knowledge all about digital, about data, and how we're actually making use of all the different data points available out there. All right, so I think before we get started for today, I would like to give a quick shout out to our sponsors, because without our sponsors, all this wouldn't be possible. So our sponsors is really eClerx, Digital Science, Happy Marketers, Mirrors, and Sparkline. All right, without further ado, maybe I will get us started with our first session. So for our very first session, we have Queen from Meiro, and she'll be sharing with us more about measuring ROI on customer-centric initiatives. So Queen, over to you.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, John. If someone could help me to allow me to share screen, that would be great. I'm a participant, I can't share my screen, and should have done this earlier, but again, these kind of sessions, these always happen, right? So while we are waiting, oh, there it is. Thank you so much. We have a really good support team. Thank you, guys. All right, so you should be able to see my screen now saying ROI of customer-centric initiatives. So all good, right? Okay, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to share on behalf of Meiro today. So this is a talk about ROI of customer-centric initiative. So essentially with this topic, ROI is something that for marketers and for even, basically anyone, is a topic that maybe is a little bit dry and we don't really want to talk about, but everyone has been asked about it at least once before, right? So today we would just like to, based on my experience, to share with you a little bit about how we think about ROI and how we kind of help our clients to change the way that they think about that, especially with the customer-centric initiatives. So why? First of all, why am I the person that's talking about this? And by the way, in case you are wondering, I'm not Manish. I'm not the guy on the poster, right? I'm covering for my colleague. So with Meiro, I am handling consulting and client solution, client success. So what we do is that I help our client to do implementation of the customer data platform that allows our clients, allows our customers to actually unify their data and build a single customer view. So our experience is really about unifying, different marketing technology, e-commerce, digital analytics capability all together. So with that, this question of, well, what's the ROI for our clients whenever they start to run a campaign or whenever they are consider a new tool, new channel, new technology investment, is always a question that is being asked, right? I'm sure that you are familiar with this. So in fact, a study by McKinsey and Company actually saw this, that for the CFOs that were being that were being asked about marketing proposal, one of the main reason that these marketing proposals are declined is in fact because simply there's just no demonstration of a clear line to value. So in other words, marketing proposals, when we are investing on MarTech, on marketing campaigns, we are not able to really show, a direct ROI on those investment. So as a technology company, obviously, we are very familiar with this question. So what I'm really aiming to do today is to help us to reframe this discussion, right? And take a more holistic approach to how we think about ROI. So let's start with what we all can agree on, which is that ROI is simply returns over costs, right? Traditional way that we think about marketing ROI is looking at the direct cost and return of your campaigns or of your marketing investment. So whether you are looking at a new platform system, a new marketing tool or channel, it's the same. You are thinking of, first of all, on the return side. What is the return in terms of revenues? Or if we are running some kind of campaigns, then it depends on the campaign objectives. We are talking about form submissions or interactions on channels, downloads or in-app actions, for instance. So those are the actions that we are optimizing it for. And what about the cost? Typically, we are thinking of the direct cost to run the campaign. So that's anything from ad costs, media buys. And here's where we go into the gritty-nitty of CTR, CPC. So those are the direct things that are easy to measure, and that's why we measure them and we are kind of obsessed with them, right? But what's wrong with this view of the ROI, or what is rather not wrong but incomplete in our opinion about this way of calculating the ROI, is because of this. It's because we have a fragmented ecosystem, right? Look, for an ecosystem, this is something that you're probably quite familiar with. If you're in the marketing circle since 2014 until now, this has been compiled, and the different categories and the number of tools have already, have already exploded over the years. Now we can't even see the individual logos there anymore, right? So for each company, you may be using different tools that is listed in this list or not. But what is, I guess, in common is for sure the fact that there is some combination of different tools and platforms in your company, right? So we are familiar with this data silo and fragmentation. So there are two key impacts of this fragmented ecosystem that is directly impacting your ROI measurement. Okay, the first one is the fact that the customer view, the single customer view, is elusive. You are looking at your consumers are multi-channel. Here, what we are looking at is how a customer or a consumer really interacts with a brand. You may be seeing some ads on mobile app, you may be going to the website, check out something, make some purchase online or offline, depending on your readily available e-commerce platform. And there are multiple various other channels, right? So that's what the customer experience is. And what does, from a brand's perspective, what does it look like? It looks like the mobile app guy looking at their own KPI. It looks like the website guy looking at their own KPI. So each tools and channels, in fact, are measuring different types of ROI because you are driving for different KPIs, right? So EDM, you are optimizing for your opens, clicks. On website, you want more views, more clicks, more purchase, and you're optimizing for that. And then on in-app, you are looking at installs or in-app actions. So in fact, all of these are not always driving towards the same ultimate single customer view or towards the same ROI, which is the return of the long-term customer value, the customer retention, and the lifetime value of a consumer. So in fact, optimizing for individual channels because simply because it's so fragmented that that's the only thing that we can do. Optimizing for that is at best locally optimizing, but forgetting the big picture, right? So that's one. The second thing, the second impact of that data fragmentation is the cost of actually unifying your data altogether. So partially part of what we do is the very first step is really data integration, bringing the different tools, different data types, data silos all together. Okay, and then looking at standardizing the data quality, because I've really seen it. I don't want to say I've seen it all, but I've seen a lot of variety when it comes to different platforms and system. Having data and insight about the same customers, but it's in different formats, different types of data quality. So there's a lot of effort and cost involved in actually bringing that together. And as well, to help system kind of integrate, talk to each other to allow you to be able to orchestrate a customer journey in a smooth way. But few people actually associate this pure cost with the ability to run better campaign and better consumer retention. Because if we think of it that way, we would actually think of it as an investment. It's the investment in data integration is to uplift your ROI from all the other platform and channels that are generating that data, right? So that's a gap of how we are thinking about ROI. Now, what else is also impacting the way that you should be thinking about ROI is what's coming, or in fact, what is already here, which is the cookieless future, the privacy-focused browsers, what's in iOS 14, which means that we are less able to target iOS consumers. So, with the rise of privacy-focused everything and cookieless future, this means that brands as well need to invest in your first-party data repository, invest in a very robust data infrastructure, right? And the ability to build a single customer view across different channel and platform. That's what it means by the identity resolution. So what is the ROI on that? What do we get in return? That's the question. And in fact, I want to flip that around and ask the question of what if we don't do this? What if we don't invest in this first party data repository, in the ability to have, unified and and all integrated data? What do you lose? Is you lose the ability to continue to have meaningful engagement, meaningful targeting, and personalization with your consumer. So avoiding that loss is also the return of this investment, because without being able to rely on your first party data repository, it's the fragmented customer journey is going to get even more fragmented. And in fact, we are not able to really see the full consumer journey, right? Like we saw it earlier. So when it comes to a single customer view, which is, the ideal view where we are able to look at all of the consumer interaction with a brand across time, regardless of the channel. When it comes to that, a single customer view can improve ROI in more subtle ways as well. For example, the ability to actually run exclusion marketing. That means excluding, are you thinking about excluding your current customers from your acquisition campaigns? Are you thinking of excluding your customer with, let's say, low NPS scores from your various advertising campaigns because they are not just the right market for you, right? So these are only done if you have a very good single customer view. And with that, it's a cost reduction that directly have an impact on your ROI. That's also an increase in revenue by improving the customer experience, and therefore retention and CLV. So the direct connection between an improved customer experience and the ability to retain and draw even higher long-term value from that customer is proven in many studies, right? And finally, just the ability to look at your customer lifetime value and your customer interaction with with the time series behavioral and transactional data is super valuable in your ability to run predictive models like next best offer. So this goes back to your retention, your improved customer experience as well. So those are the ways that are kind of indirect, but it does have an impact on your ROI. Okay. And if you are a B2B marketer, any B2B marketers here, you would identify with this. In fact, you have the added challenge of there's a longer sales cycle, right? So there's a study, there's a LinkedIn study that shows that a big majority of the digital marketers, especially in the B2B space, feel the pressure or are required to measure the ROI within the first month of their campaign. And guess what? Their sales cycle is 3 months or longer. So how do you expect your campaign to deliver if your sales cycle is in fact longer than that? Right? If you can't really wait for that sales cycle. And here a super small group of people actually come back and measure the ROI over a longer period of time, for example, 6 months. And here, why 6 months is because this is the typical sales cycle for a B2B business. So already here we can see the gap between when the returns are supposed to happen and when we are measuring and expecting that results to come in, right? So all of that altogether is to to say that we really need to redefine how we think about ROI, or the horizon in which ROI should be benchmarked, right? So there is the short term, where we can think about, the consumers and their path to purchase. We can think about optimizing for certain short-term action, while maintaining a great customer experience, right? But also in the long term, we want to be able to optimize for the entire journey, right? To be prepared for new things, new channels, new changing consumer behavior or preferences, right? And to also support product development initiatives with the insight that we get from consumers' behavior and interaction over time. So that goes to your long-term ROI as well, right? So really optimizing your ROI and improving that really boils down to these two things, right? Just two things. One is improving ROI by improving the data quality and data unification initiatives, right? So for this strategy, first-party data collection is really crucial, right? In the context of a first-party data study, by BCG here. They are studying about the brand's efforts and challenges when they are building a first-party data strategy. It is found that data-driven marketing here based on first-party data can really have a huge impact on both your revenue and cost savings. So that goes to what? ROI, right? And then the second pillar of that is improving customer experience with better targeting, more relevant messages, with frequency cap in all various channels, so they have just the right level of communication, right? And improving that has as well a direct impact into the final revenue. Okay, so I would just like to leave you with this. The brand investment overall, as a marketer, you are, nowadays a marketer, a performance marketer is not just about a channel, but you are thinking about your brand as well, in a more holistic picture. So where does brand investment come in is about the value of a long-term brand investment comes from overall improving the marketing ROI over the course of several sales cycles. So you're not thinking about measuring the ROI of individual investment or individual campaigns, but it's about looking at how it provides an uplift of ROI over several sales cycle. So it does sound like a quite a long-term thing, and it takes time, and that's exactly why we call it an investment and not cost, right? So this really frames our discussion with the clients about how we think about technology ROI investment and how they should think about investing in their first party data repository. Okay, so that's really, if I can leave you with just one thing through this 15 minutes, that would be this. Okay, so that's it. Thank you for your attention. Let me look at the question. And in the meantime, if you are curious what we do, or if you would like to connect and ask me some individual questions, please feel free. So first question, how does a company with no e-commerce platform or D2C platform use a CDP? Let me maybe reframe that a little bit by saying that it's what are you trying to achieve through a CDP? Because I think your question is not so much about how do you use a CDP, but how do you build a single view of your customer, right? And so with that, a single view of the customer is, if we can put it, very simply, it's simply about data integration and unification and recognizing the customer profile across different places. So first, from the effort of data collection, even if you don't have an e-commerce platform, you don't have much online kind of presence, your customer data comes from everywhere. So not having an e-commerce platform doesn't mean that you cannot transform the organization digitally, and making sure that that customer data is captured in a way that allow us to really build a single customer view out of that. So the question is more like, how are we collecting data with a view? of being able to unify the different data sources together, and how are we actually investing in data standardization, transformation, and building a single customer view out of that, so that we can benefit from the unified view. And then the third thing as well is, how do we enable the organization to actually capture and make use of that, right? Because there's no point putting in so much money to do that, and without giving that to your product development, giving that to your finance guy, giving that to different department, not just customer facing one, right? So that's I hope that kind of answer your question. If not, do connect with me individually. I would love to have a deeper discussion than this kind of format can allow us, right? Second question, for a banking customer where every penny is accounted for, it's true. How does technology backend cost for things like improving data structure and data unification is calculated in terms of ROI? So then it goes back to what we talked about earlier about the short term and the long term, I guess. And the question is, who are you having a discussion with? Because obviously, if you are having a discussion with, the marketer at an operational level, then the horizon is shorter, and that frame the discussion. If you're talking with a with basically like a department that technology department that has a longer term horizon, then the discussion is kind of different as well. For our banking customers, we do have big banking customers, especially in Indonesia as well. So the way that we think about that is two things, right? We are always framing it as both short-term and long-term. And as well, number one is, how does this investment allow you to run better campaign, save costs in your campaign, in the specific campaigns that we know you're running? And then on the other end is, what are the cost savings in the long term if you have fragmented system and you don't have that all kind of unified? So that's how we kind of shape the discussion about that. Okay.
Yep. All right. Thanks, Queen. So the third question is, so we have another question from Natesh. So Natesh asks, like, with Apple iOS 14 privacy feature being rolled out, how has it impact data and ROI measurement? Because I think it actually limits data collection to some extent as well. And how does Meiro plan to overcome this challenge?
Great question. Thank you so much. So I guess just a super quick primer for those who are not too familiar with iOS 14, and what we are talking about is that with iOS 14, Apple has given consumers with a direct kind of option whether they want to be tracked. Those who use iPhone probably has seen this, right? So, instead of having it as a default option previously, and consumers have to actually opt out. So from the consumer's point of view, this is great because you have a choice. This doesn't mean that you see fewer ads. It just means that the advertiser are not able to really look at your behavior across different app and build a behavioral profile out of that. And what that means is less ability to target with the advertisers. Now, for our clients, what that means are two things. One is that, excuse me, that right now it is still new, so we are still adjusting to it. So the first thing is really looking at measuring the iOS consumers, iOS campaigns separately from other campaigns, right? Campaigns that are, looking or measuring the iOS user cohort separately. So, so we don't mix that up. And by the way, estimates so far, because it's still so new, but estimates are anywhere between 5 to 20% opt-in. That means we are losing up to between 80 to 95% of traffic, right? So, so that's the extent of that. So that's the first thing that we want to talk about. The second thing that is more long-term is, again, it goes back to building the consumer journey and building the first-party data repository. Because with brands, when you have a mobile app, what you are able to really maybe look at is, let's say, connecting your consumer, connecting your app user between your mobile app and your website with, let's say, decorated link, right? If they choose to, follow your link and going to the website. So that's another way. If you have very good first party data collection on the website that allows you to connect the dots and understand that, oh, hey, that's the same consumer, that's the same person that we have. So that also allows the brands to, connect the consumer journey accordingly.
All right. So from what I understood, it's basically making use of participants who have actually allowed and actually making use of first-party data to actually connect the dots so that we can understand better what's the whole consumer journey. Would that be right?
Absolutely,
All
yes.
right. Okay, I think we have one more question. This question would be from me. I think maybe I'm just curious. So what do you think would be the biggest challenge for data unification? Because I think I do agree with you, data unification it's really, really important. And because with data unification, you can actually understand the whole consumer journey, um, the single customer view much better as well to understand what's the whole consumer journey. So I was just wondering, what do you think would be the biggest challenge?
Well, you're putting me in a difficult position because it's singular, right? One challenge, so I need to pick one. Um, I can tell you it depends on my day, depends on, the client I have to deal with for the day. But, every day is a different challenge. But I think moving forward, again, for brands, the way that they think about data is now different, right? Because it used to be just second thoughts, and now everyone is hogging data everywhere, and wanting to hold data as much as possible. So this leads to, we have so many different things to different data and platform to kind of unify together. So the way that I think about it is data unification, the kind of gap, the level of difficulty of data unification corresponds to the um, level of silo in your different department and workflow,
Okay.
because it's data is directly an impact of how connected your different silo in the organization is. So the challenge for that for me is how well are you able to achieve operational kind of synergy, because operational synergy actually leads directly to your data synergy. What do I mean by that? Even with just marketing itself, right? If the website people are working closely with mobile app team, for the
Mhm.
example we talked about earlier, if they're working closely so that consumers from the mobile app who goes to the website can be recognized individually with a first party basis, right? If they're having that discussion, then when I'm collecting that data, there's less difficulty for me to actually connect and link all of those, right? So data cleansing, data clarification, and standardization, those are technical difficulty that we can overcome. It's, given enough time and resources, it can be overcome. But kind of, when we talk about like unification or synergy of department operationally, that goes to the level of strategy, of priority of the organization, and that's where I think is the bigger challenge comes in. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. So we have one very final question. I'm sorry for the additional questions. We took a bit longer. So for our fourth and final question, this question will be from John. So how can we separate between returns arising from different factors or campaign? So for example, business expansion might have helped in gaining more revenue, which is happening at the same time as 5 other campaigns being carried out on different social media platforms.
Right. Very, very good questions. In an ideal world, obviously, we do something like A/B testing. We measure individually, right? So that is, that's a textbook answer, and that's easy enough to suggest. I think that you bring out a very good point, which is there is so much more. Factors that goes into that. So it again boils down to the level of how are we kind of framing that discussion in scope and in time frame, right? In scope itself, are we measuring campaign by campaign, by channel, with which you need to compare apple to apple, right? Um, and then over time, then if we are undergoing business expansion, then we cannot comparing we cannot compare a campaign in the time of business expansion with relevant, like similar campaign with so many years ago. So it's the same thing with any kind of comparison of marketing performance during these 2 years of pandemic. Any kind of comparison with the before year is practically meaningless, right? Because we're operating in a different environment. So I think I would say we need to accept a certain level of uncertainty in there, because we are always, we are in a very fastly moving world, and there's so many different factors that goes into it. So a certain level of uncertainty is there. But having as much as possible the same framework of comparison, and think about both scope, right, and the time dimension would help in that, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think indeed, because there's quite a lot of uncertainty that we can't really predict sometimes. All right, right. Thanks,
Absolutely.
Queen. All right. So out of all the questions, which one would be your favorite to award the voucher? So all right. So guys, so we actually would be giving out $50 vouchers to the top voted question by our speaker.
Wow. It's interesting because all of the questions have their own, and this is cliche, right? But it's true. All of the question makes me think a little bit. I can't really jump into the answer, but I would, I guess, pick the last question, because this is something that I will continue to think about. And I hope I have a better answer for you, but I don't, because that's the same challenge that we are working with our clients to work through as well. So I would continue to think about that question, and I would say that's my favorite one. It's the one that made me think the most.
All right. Thank you, Queen.
Yeah.
All right. So John, we'll be PMing you our email. So do drop us an email so that we can actually work with you to actually arrange how the vouchers will be given. All right. Thanks, Queen.
Thank
All right.
you.
All right. So next up, we have another exciting speaker. So we have Hari from eClerx Digital, who will be sharing with us a very exciting topic of really experimentation. So his topic would really be digital experimentation framework and program maturity models. All right. So over to you, Hari.
Hey, John. Thank you, John. It's very different to be on the other side as a speaker versus hosting it. Um, cool. All right. Before I start, thank you everyone for joining us for this evening and tuning in to listen to us on these topics. And thanks to the co-speakers as well. Um, Starting off, before I get into the topic, why me and why this topic, I am the lead digital strategist and analytics consultant eClerx for the APAC region. And as part of my role, I help and enable my clients in terms of implementing their digital platforms and adopting those platforms as well, right? Driving adoption of the platforms itself. So in that journey, I've worked on certain projects where I've helped clients enable their A/B testing and experimentation programs. And I've learned a lot as well in the past 2 years on that. And I thought I'll share my learnings and in terms of a framework itself, right, rather than a process. Um, Before we go in, setting a base here, what is digital experimentation? uh, it's about taking out the guesswork and risk, right? Your teams, your various teams, product teams, customer experimentation team, your digital marketing teams, they will have certain experience that they think will work for your customers or for their customers, and they would be suggesting certain, say, creators or copies or even taglines, right? So the process of digital experimentation takes out that guesswork and brings in variations to test and then decide a winner, right? And there's science behind it, there's statistical significance behind it to decide which one wins. So this whole digital experimentation means it could be any element which we'll cover in the following part of the session. but it's basically to take out the guesswork and then decide which one works for your customer. Leave it to the customers to decide, rather than you deciding, this will work for the customer per se, right? Given that, what is the process for us to identify these ideas and also get to the variations that you would want to test? Right. I'll go step by step. First is to define the goals. Yes, you would want to experiment various digital experiences, but what is the goal? Like, what is that ultimately you would want to deliver through that experiment? For example, if you're an e-commerce company, are you experimenting to deliver conversions, the final conversions, right? Or are you experimenting to increase your cart addition rate? Are you experimenting to increase your checkout rate? Right? These are your goals. If you're a non-e-commerce company, say a blog or a publisher company, are you looking to increase your time on site for your visitors, right? Or the number of blogs, the number of articles that they read on your website? And those goals are the ones that will drive your experiment, right? What are you going to experiment about? So defining your goals upfront is one of the primary step to do before you start with your experimentation process. Then deep dive into the data that you might have, right? That's how we've been doing at eClerx as well. Deep diving into the data based on the goals. Say, take cart addition, for example. Reverse engineer and look back in terms of the funnel to see what's working out, which customers are adding to cart more versus the ones who are not adding to cart, right? So there you will find out the gap in terms of why is that good performing segment is adding cart more, while the ones who are not adding to cart, what is happening in terms of the gap there. So these will lead you to identifying the gaps that you can fill in, and in turn also ideate, right? Should I make add to cart even more prominent? Should I have better product variants for these segments of users? If it is articles, should I have an articles recommendation section with every article that I show, right? So once you deep dive into data and find out those gaps, that will start triggering you in terms of the ideations that you would want to look at, right? And another key step in this ideation process is prioritizing. Given the various stakeholders you might involve and your team members as well, there'll be a lot of ideas that you would generate, right? Which is good. What you should also do is prioritize them. Again, there is a formula-based approach that you can take. The common one is more, based on the impact, effort, and the time it would take to run. Or every test will have its own run time. So it's more based on the impact that will have to your conversion metric. It could be your revenue, it could be your app submission, application submission, or even the blocks, number of blocks that they read, right? And the effort that will take to develop the test. As you could imagine, changing color of a button is very low complex and easy to implement given the maturity of A/B testing tools that we have now versus say an upsell or cross sell data science backed experiment that you would want to run. So the effort plays a role here in prioritizing. And finally, the runtime based on the traffic volume. Will it take 1 week for me to reach a conclusion versus a 1 month versus a 3 months, right? So with all of this, you'll be able to prioritize your ideas. So define your goals, list down your ideas, prioritize them, and then you will get into a test development and run phase. Right? This is where you actually go in and develop your tests and launch your tests. So here you have ready off-the-shelf platforms that you could use, right? Adobe Target, Google Optimize, Optimizely, Insider. There are a lot of platforms based on uh, the stack that your company is in or your clients are in, which you could choose and start developing the test within that, and you could launch your tests and then monitor. Obviously, once you've monitored and concluded, this is where you start identifying the winner. Obviously not every test will be a winning test. You would have tests where the control version, which is your actual version one, versus your variant that you developed as part of your idea, right? That might win. So here is where you identify your test as your fourth step, and then decide on, do you go back to the whiteboard and ideate more to run furthermore tests, or do you go ahead and implement the winner as your permanent experience, right? That's where the post-test analysis and deep dive stage comes in. So once you identify the winner, it's just statistically concluding the winner, right? But stopping there, in our experience at least, hasn't helped. It's more the post-test analysis where it helps, where you find out, was this result primarily driven by seasonality, for example, say the Chinese New Year campaigns or a seasonal campaign that was running, or was it primarily driven to a flagship product sale or a particular article that went viral and that kind of biased the whole result. So your post-test analysis, where you deep dive into, is where you'll find out, should I make this a permanent experience for my customers, or do I go back to the whiteboard, exclude certain segments, or target certain segments and run? So post-test analysis is a key step that you might also have to consider when it comes to your end-to-end experimentation process, right? Taking a step back, this is kind of a framework or a process for you to follow for your end-to-end experimentation. However, within this steps itself, right? In our experience, what we have seen is test development, running, and identifying the winner are relatively the easier step, because, as I said, there are a lot of advanced platforms which have ready modules that you could use. Any complex scenarios that you could think of. I recently saw a platform which has ready modules, kind of stories like that you see on Facebook or LinkedIn. You can launch stories on your website or app, just enabling a module from that platform, right? So platforms are so advanced. So third and fourth are relatively easier step. Second as well, once you've identified your ideas, prioritizing that also is easier once you nail down your framework in terms of scoring. The key challenge is defining your goals and the idea part, not the prioritizing, but ideating. What do you run as a test? And the second key challenge would be your post-test analysis. What did I learn from the test? Was it a particular channel or was it a particular segment? What do I take back as a learning? Right. These two are the key challenges. For this session, given it's 15 minutes, yes, we can deep dive into each of these steps. I'll focus on defining the goals and how do you step up in terms of the ideas that you could run, right? That's the maturity of your tests that you could run. So in terms of ideas itself, at least personally at eClerx, and I have worked on clients where it's multi-year program that we're working on in terms of A/B testing and experimentation. So obviously we have had challenges in how do I step up the game from last year to this year or last quarter to this quarter? How do I step up the game in terms of the ideas that we identify and test, right? So that's where this framework kind of came up. How do we follow the questions that we can answer and then identify the ideas? And the first step that we have found it successful is obviously looking at the customers, right? Given the customer centric approach that every client is taking, every business is taking now, first find out who do you want to target and who do you want to experiment for? Is it your prospects coming to your website or app, or is it your likely to convert customers who are further down in the purchase funnel, right? Or is it your converted customers, right, who have converted, who have bought a product or signed up for your account? What do you do after they sign up, right? Are you going to experiment the experience that they get after they convert? And other segments like active users, are you going to experiment for your active users versus say inactive users? How do I make them active? um, or is it new users versus returning users? Reason why we start with who is, or we suggest to start with who is, all of these are separate branches, right? The areas in your website or the sections in your app might differ for each of these users. Your messaging, your strategy also differs for these users, right? So starting with who based on your data analysis is the right step we have found so far. And once you find out whom are you going to test for, then is the how part, right? Then comes the how section of it. How do I experiment, or how do I reach out to those customers in terms of the experience? Do I look at the UI and UX, like the user interface and user experience for these users, or do I look at the end-to-end journey itself, like the number of steps that they have, right? The number of clicks that they make to reach to the conversion. Do I look at the journey itself? For e-commerce or other clients where pricing is applicable, that could be another tactics, right? Do I play with the pricing? For example, combining pricing with promos. Do I show the percentage discount on my PDP versus do I show the slashed actual absolute pricing, right? What works for my customers? Do they get sold on percentage versus do they get sold on the absolute number? So these play a factor. And then the promos itself, do I, if it is prospect, maybe promos wouldn't apply, or likely to convert, promos might apply to move them to the next step, right? So tactics that you follow would come next once you identify the customers. After the how part, where do I personalize or try out this experience will come. Once you've identified your customers, a prospect, for example, the tactics in terms of how you're going to optimize their experience and experiment. Then where do I do it, in my website or mobile website or in my app, or do I do it through my other own channels or paid channels, right? Email, display or video or social. So all of these individually are paths by themselves, if you could imagine. So this is where your ideas get matured and it goes to the next step, right? From your color of button to you bring in all these variables to narrow down into an idea. Okay, now that I've decided, say for example, I target a prospect and the journey that they take to convert, and maybe it's on email where you send an email to get them to your website or app. Then you will also go back to your web, the journey of the prospect. So now you, once you visualize, you can map a lot of elements that you can A/B test or multivariate test as well, right? Experiment. And finally, the what part of it. So once you decide all of this, the location as well, then comes the what part of it, right? Am I going to experiment images or creatives as part of this journey or a page or a location or within the app? Or is it going to be the textual content, title, email subject, or email content? Or is it CTA, the copy within the CTA, etc.? Forms are other common element that might cut across any of these areas, right? Am I going to try with a short form versus a long form? Can I try a pre-filled form where possible, like say given a postal code, can I pre-populate the other elements possible, right? Or if I know the customer, say if this is an active user converted customer, can I pre-fill the form? And off late, we are seeing where emails are advanced. You can have pre-populated forms within the emails itself, right? Where it's easier for users to just click submit there. They need not even come to a landing page. That's another experience by itself. So am I going to test that? And finally, is it about overhauling everything? Am I going to test the entire page or screen with a challenging variant or the email layout itself? So this is an ideation framework that's working out in terms of stepping up your ideas from, say, a low complex test where it's basic rule based, changing the color or changing the image for the blanket customers, versus you follow this framework step by step to enable a lot more ideas and a lot more complex ideas with multiple variables coming into play. Um, and just a quick example, not keeping it theoretical, also being mindful of the limitation and time I have. If you take a product details page, for example, the who part can be new visitor to the product details page, right? Versus a returning visitor. And say the goal is increasing cart addition rate. Obviously, it's product detail page that will be a primary location, right? Um, New visitors versus returning. And then visitors from a particular campaign, say social versus an email campaign. And within social, it could be a product-based campaign that you're running. So those could be your who part, right? How do I target? Will be the next one. So do I look at UI UX for those individual users? Say for a users from a returning visitor, do I bring back the product that he saw last time on this product detail page versus just keep the control here? Or for social visitors, do I come up with a campaign very relevant to social users? That could be your campaign specific strategy here. Pricing as well, an example I quoted earlier, it could be a percentage discount versus your absolute number, or even combining both and placing that very near to your add to cart so that that triggers add to cart click, right? And where PDP is what we are discussing here as an example, and what is it? Um, off late, for example, if your branding team found out that image versus video is working out well for certain segment of users, they are looking at Facebook videos or YouTube videos and they're coming from those campaigns into your website, then you could also test the experience between a static image versus a preloaded video, right, of a product. Could be a 360-degree view or a clickable video itself, right? And then pricing that I discussed. So these are high-level examples that you could think of given a product details page. Obviously, with the changes in the location and the goals, you could think of multiple others, right? This is more the ideation process itself, which is very important to set the roadmap for rest of the stages, which is then easier, right? And given these ideas, how do you start from an initial stage to and matured and defined process as a program itself, right? So again, here I have not boiled the ocean, right? There could be 4 to 5 stages like crawl, walk, run, and fly, or there could be even further granular segments within each of this. I've tried to simplify it given the time limit that we have and also the audiences we might have. I see that there are mix of audiences here. Happy to discuss this in person if anyone is interested to brainstorm even further more stages. But high level, if you look at how do you mature in terms of a program itself? You start with initial and ad hoc way of experimenting, right? When I mean initial and ad hoc, if you look at these parameters itself for an A/B testing or a personalization program, starting with your customer targeting, it could be a blanket users, everyone visiting my product detail pages or everyone visiting my home page, versus a rule based to start with, right? Returning, etc. Matured stage would be where you do have blanket audiences and rule based, but on top of that, you mature to a level where you're able to cater one-to-one personalization, where you have your first party data strategy sorted, you have your ID sorted through the platform that you have, and then for the post login mostly, you're able to serve one-to-one personalized offers that is sorted in the backend. Right. So that's kind of your matured stage where you start enabling that one-to-one personalization for your users. In terms of channels as well. Uh, from our experience, what we see is web, email, and social, right? All of these teams, in our experience, we have seen them run in silo, right? Web team runs their own A/B testing experiment program. Email team, being a different team, they run their own experimentation program. Social as well, media agencies, right? They are part of a different team from what we have seen, and they run their own A/B testing in terms of audience targeting, creators, copies, etc. Right? So initial stage, yes, that's fine, because if you're the owner of this process, you would also be first testing the grounds and getting things run in silo. But in terms of defined and managed, obvious way to run this is have a team that cuts across all these various stakeholders within the organization, have a common program like what I showed earlier in place, have a process like people, platform, and process. Might sound cliche, but that's what is working out, right? And have everyone have their say, like a campaign specific. If there's a campaign that media agency is thinking of, obvious um, end goal for them would be to drive traffic to your website or app. So then your web team comes into play. So bring all of them together and have a defined and managed program where you or your client owns the entire library and roadmap, and they enable it for these various stakeholders, right? So that takes me to the next parameter that you can look at in terms of maturity for the program, stakeholders. Um, from our experience, what we have seen is the online team or the team which owns website are the ones who trigger or start with this A/B testing program in an organization to make it as a overall program. Yes, digital marketing team run their own A/B testing with the media agencies, etc. But the defined and managed stage, where your most matured stage could be all these stakeholders mapped with a RACI, like responsibility, accountability, also consulting and informative roles played in. But there's a centralized team which runs an experimentation program, cutting across all the parameters we saw earlier, right? So that's kind of the matured stage. Every party involved knows there is an experiment running through this campaign or through these channels, and this is the goal that we are driving towards, and all of them contribute. The next parameter to look at is technology. Initially, when it's silo, teams might be using their inbuilt A/B testing modules. When I mean inbuilt, it's more your CMS platform might have its own A/B testing module. Obviously, social channels have their own A/B testing modules. Facebook has its own A/B testing options. Google has its own A/B testing options within the channel. So all of those are used by the respective teams. When it comes to define and manage stage, 80% of your program must be managed by a dedicated platform, right? This is purely to drive consistency across all the programs that you run. So it could be your Adobe stack or Google stack or Salesforce stack, or your dedicated A/B testing and personalization stack like Optimizely, Insider, etc. But it should be a platform that can talk to all these channels, and you run it out of that. Um, Few channels like say TikTok or others who are yet to be integrated or have a matured modules in platform could be those modules that you leverage. And finally, last but not the important parameter that we've seen help in maturity stage is obviously the experiment team, guys. It's more about who do you have as part of your team to enable you to get to that matured stage. Commonly, what we have seen is a data analyst working on the data and coming up with the gaps or reporting insights. It stops with that, right? And then it gets fed into the owners of the product or web or email, and they decide on what do I run in terms of A/B test. However, in the matured stage, what works out is having a mix of data analysts, developers who can develop the test, right? Have an HTML or CSS or email development capabilities, and develop that control and challenger variants. A roadmap manager, like the one who can speak to all these stakeholders, who knows what is going into the experiments roadmap and owns that roadmap. And finally, a program evangelist, like the one again who evangelizes the benefits of the program. Hey, these are the tests we ran last quarter. This is the benefit that we have achieved. Are you interested to onboard to us? I understand, you are running a program on your own. Can we combine and have goal set? These kind of conversations to happen within the client's org or your own org if you're a client, and have the program evangelist who champions this program, right? These are all key pillars to get to a matured stage and a centralized stage in terms of the program definition, right? So I do have an example in terms of the same PDP example I took you through earlier. If you look at matured experiments for a PDP page itself with the same goal, uh, three examples here. One could be the web team which owns this page and the marketing team which runs digital marketing combined together. They're looking at a seamless campaign experience. The same creative and copy that they show on their social channels, for example, display banner, is carried forward and the whole PDP is redone to have the same messaging, color, copy, and the experience, right? That could be one example. Next one, an advanced experiment could be bringing in the data science team and implementing a cross-sell or upsell section within the page, right? Where bundles of products are shown to test and see if that's working out. Again, this also would be possible with the platforms which have ready modules that you can enable. But this again wouldn't come if the teams are running experiments in silo. It's more for the various teams to come together. And a last example could be the web and customer experience team coming up with new features like say wishlist. In our experience, we have seen wishlist working out very well for retail and e-commerce clients, where you kind of achieve multiple goals within that. One, to add to your wishlist, the user has to log in. So in a way, you're trying to achieve your first party data strategy there, enabling them to log in. Second, you can start profiling your customer based on what they add to wishlist, right? You can start profiling your customer based on the products that they add to wishlist. Lastly, a common behavior we noticed, me as a customer as well, is I add products to cart as a proxy wish list, right? Where I can come back and see if I'm still interested to buy, and then I remove it from my cart. So the metrics get goofed up in terms of when it comes to add to cart rate. So you also try to optimize that. So these kind of feature enablement also comes with a combination of your web team, your product team, and also the customer experience team. So these are ideas that are not low complex. So over time, if you have multi-year relationship with your clients, or as a client you have multi-year program, these are kind of experiments that can be enabled when you have multiple stakeholders coming in, right? Yeah, so these are the topics I wanted to take you through in terms of what is an end-to-end experimentation process, why do you do that, and in that, which is the most complex stage that, based on my experience and eClerx experience, that we have figured out, and how do we tackle that for our various clients. So yeah, let me take a pause here and let me join John to take in the questions of Zach here.
Yeah, hi, Hari. Thanks for the presentation. It was very detailed. I was afraid there wasn't any questions. So in fact, there's some questions and also some more questions from the other speakers, so which is good. So the first question is, any real life examples or nuances in terms of helping organizations to put cross-functional teams together to do this? The framework is great, but how to do it is another issue. Because I have another similar question, right? So any example to get a buy-in from the board or C-level? Any tips that you can give?
Yes, Zach, yeah, sure. Got the question. Yeah, we have been there for many of our clients and have experienced that. The first thing is to get that program evangelist, right? Obviously, who is the one who can talk to these various stakeholders and who can get them on board? And how do you get them on board is first run certain set of experiments which show return on investment, right? Hey, see, not all the tests can be winners, but all of those tests can demonstrate return on investment. Like we learned ABC from this test. You have 6 steps versus 4 steps, and 4 steps worked out well. It might be obvious, but through experiment, you'll be able to prove with statistical significance and the science behind it, right? So running few set of experiments and showing return on investments has helped in getting more attention, if I can put it that way, right, within the organization, and get a lot of stakeholders buy in and get on board. That's one. Second is removing the hurdles in terms of them onboarding, right? One key challenge I've seen in my experience across other parts of the org is the bandwidth and resourcing. So if you're able to demonstrate the platform and the skill sets that you can bring in, or your client champion or your own team can bring in terms of removing the hurdles of setting up the experiment, launching it, doing the analysis, etc., then that eases the other side, other party, right? They think, okay, it's more me getting the benefit, and the heavy lifting is done by this centralized team who's coming and speaking to me. You be a client or you be a partner enabling the client. Those two things have helped, Zach. Demonstrating ROI through quick win experiments to get attention, and then also bringing to view that you can remove those hurdles easily, which will do the heavy lifting. These two have helped a lot.
Okay, that's great. So there's one question about AK. So how do companies deal with A/B tests that takes forever to reach significance?
Good question, AK. So to that, AK, before even we launch, right, the ideation and prioritization stage, there's this runtime calculation that you could do. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with that, given your background. The runtime calculator, at least in my framework and in the way we support our clients, we have a threshold where we don't approve or we don't run experiments that go beyond a particular score. And to that score, the runtime is one of the contribution there, right? So if it's going to take, say, more than a month, for example, where it's too long for that client customer cycle, then we don't prioritize that. Say for B2B, the previous speaker mentioned 6 months is the cycle for purchase, right? There, 1 or 2 months might make sense. But for an e-commerce or retail client, the purchase behavior might be monthly or bi-weekly. So there's a threshold that's set, and any experiment based on the traffic volume, if it's going to take more than that threshold time, then it's scored very low and it's deprioritized. Unless it's a strategic test that the business wants to run, and they're open to bypass the statistical conclusion, right? They still want to just test to see how it trends, then that's entertained. Otherwise, the threshold and the formula and the scoring that you do for prioritization will take care of it.
Okay, that's good. So one question from Jeremy. What are the best channels to start with for A/B testing? Which channels are the most difficult ones and why?
Web obviously is the easiest and low-hanging fruit in terms of implementing, simply because one, the platforms are matured and experiments have been running there for many years now. It's like matter of minutes or hours where you can launch a test, ideate and launch, right? And then you can scale into emails, again, simply because the platforms that you might be launching emails from, Salesforce or Adobe Campaign or the equivalents, Eloqua, etc., they have inbuilt modules where you can test the subject line or the copies within the modules itself, right? So email is another, like own channel is another avenue where you can start launching your A/B test seamlessly. The most difficult one, in my opinion, is where you have omni-channel experience, right? Paid media users coming to your website and then going beyond that. And the other section of the website, I wouldn't call it as a channel. Section is mostly the post login and your converted users. And again, that's because there are a lot of security challenges you might face, be it irrespective of the industry that your client or you're in, right? The post login, there are challenges in which you might face to deploy your experiments. Yeah, that's how I would rank channels and sections in terms of challenging versions.
Okay. One more question from Jeremy. So what is the difference between A/B testing, MBT, and personalization in your opinion?
Great question. Thanks for that, Jeremy. I must have covered that in the session, but yeah, A/B testing is where you have a control like your current experience and you challenge it with just one more variant, right? You can go ABC where you'll have multiple variants there. So that's more just selecting one element and challenging it with multiple other variants. When it comes to multivariate tests, right, it's more multiple elements within the experience. I'm just taking a basic example here. Say you're looking at PDP, challenging a creative with another creative and a third creative is ABC, whereas challenging creative plus the CTA, right, plus the product detail name. These are multiple elements within one experience that you're going to change. So that becomes a multivariate test. So imagine the combinations that you might have, right? it's like 3 factorial. You might have, you can end up with 6 or 9 kind of combinations there. So that becomes a multivariate tests, right? So that's the difference there between A/B and multivariate.
Okay, so I think one final questions by Jeremy. Will testing tools move to the server side with all these new privacy restrictions? I think this is also going to be one big challenge going down the line, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Very relevant question given the industry trend. The third-party cookies going away. Unless you have a first-party cookie strategy and the platforms are ready for it, server side is going to be the trend. And looking at the way platforms are maturing and clients are maturing, there are brands, clients, and platforms who already started exploring that, especially in the app side of world, right, where it's hard to get through SDK and deploy an A/B test. Server side is more preferred. So server side would be coming in, but again, the easiness to deploy tests there will be challenging. For now, a client side is easier, like any other exercise, right? Say tag implementation, but then server side would be more prominent in the cookieless world, third-party cookieless world.
Okay. Thanks for all the questions. I think there's only one winner from ZR who is asked the first question, because the rest is from the speakers, because we are very, very enthusiastic and know a lot and trying to give Hari some hard time. Yeah, thanks a lot. So ZR, please contact us with that email sent in the chat. And next we have AK with the final topic of the demo. This is the part whereby you need to pray to the demo gods, everything's working. And AK is from Sparkline. He will be demoing Spike, if I pronounce it correctly, making elements of data science more accessible. So this is problem solving side of things. So go straight ahead. I think I'll be very interested to see this too. Yep.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Zach. I'm guessing everyone can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Awesome, sweet. So hello, everybody. Thank you so much for your participation today. I'm AK from Sparkline. We're a digital analytics consulting firm based out of here in Singapore, but we deal with some of the largest enterprises here in Southeast Asia, as well as in Australia and New Zealand. Today, I'm here in front of you to talk to you about one of our cool new offerings that we're really excited about. It's called Spike. And as the title of the slide says, it aims to help enterprises deploy machine learning or statistical learning models into production, aims to help improve the throughput of data science pipelines or analytics workflows, and aims to do that faster, cheaper, or better than most alternatives. This is not meant to be clickbaity. I know we've had a little bit of a heavy couple of topics this far, and take a lean back, relax. What I'm going to aim to do is just help you visualize the problem area that Spike aims to solve first. And then we'll hop into a friendly demo that's meant to be a little interactive that walks through most of these claims in a little bit detail. So without any further ado, let's just hop right in. So as we speak to most of the enterprises that we have as clients, and even just do industry research, we find that the layout of the problem in the industry, the way we see it, is described by this slide, which is a simplistic version of that. Most enterprises have business level experts. So these are executives, these are experts in industry. So if you're in the financial industry or the banking industry, you have people who've been in this space and are familiar with the regulatory landscape and how customers purchase products and so on and so forth, and have been doing this for years, if not decades, right? They usually typically identify emerging trends. Thanks to their expertise, they identify problems that their businesses want to solve. And they're some of the best in the world in coming in and being able to prioritize the problems that businesses need to solve. Now, machine learning, statistical learning, A/B testing, and experimentation, all of those are simply means to an end. And some of these questions, or many of these questions, typically tend to be really, really good candidates for statistical learning methods because of the evolution of computing over the past decade, 2 decades, and also simply because of the great fit between most of the problems that you see on screen, as well as the statistical methods that tend to be force multipliers to help you solve them. Now, even though this is typically the way we visualize how enterprises go about attempting to use machine learning, statistical learning, data science, or analytical techniques to solve their problems, each of those blue boxes should trigger a flag in your head. Why? Because software engineering 101, most problems, if you want to solve a really large problem, can be solved through this process of decomposition, which is you take a really big problem, training a machine learning model, and you break it out into what does that actually mean. Typically, in a heavily simplified manner, again, training a machine learning model looks like the bright purple boxes over here, the grayed out ones in the activation. We'll not speak about that right now, but we will eventually. There's an element of data capture, which is, what does data even mean? Is it a CSV on your machine? Is it a huge, powerful data stream that's coming in through multiple tens of thousands of servers somewhere and needs to be processed in like sub-millisecond latency? Could be both, could be neither, could be a blend of multiple, no one knows. And then there's the element of processing, which is this data could be completely malformed. It could be user inputs and all the associated problems across. And then there's the actual modeling stage itself, which is if we've done our jobs right thus far, we can feed this data into something and have a model get trained. Now that something itself can be decomposed into, are you going to train it on your own laptop with the 8 cores that you have, or are you going to ship it off to the cloud and use accelerators with thousands or tens of thousands of cores and GPUs and so on and so forth. All of these are very niche knowledge spaces that require heavy expertise across each of these pillars. And that's what we want you to visualize. But also have the person who's going to be doing this have a decent level of understanding across. So you need both wide level of expertise as well as deep. And these 2 slides are simply the ones that we want you to keep in mind, because an image is worth 1,000 words as we go into the demo. Finally, through large enterprise surveys, we see 2 big metrics. And this is Digital Analytics Wednesday, so I'm not going to bore you with just slides of graphs. But the 2 metrics are only 11% of organizations can deploy an ML model in a week. Only 11%, and these are large enterprises with really good budgets, and they're not swamped or stuck for cash, so to speak. And 64% take a month or longer. This anecdotally confirms our biases as we speak to industry veterans, because this is the common narrative out there. It's really hard to iterate, and software development is all about iteration. And this is not going away anytime soon. Between last year and this year, that amount of time required to deploy a model has actually gone up, not down, and significantly so. So what Spike aims to do is to solve these problems using these 4 high-level principles. And given a 15-minute demo, we'll go through most of them in a practical approach, and we'll see how that is. We aim to reduce data and compute costs up to 90%. That sounds clickbaity, it's not. We'll actually see how we do that. We aim to reduce the friction around deployment of models, which is, yes, you can train a model, anyone can do that on your command line, but actually getting it into a production environment without, breaking the bank is the hard part, one of the hard parts. We also aim to reduce human error and increase the repeatable logic of these pipelines. Say you've trained a clustering model once, right? It's taken you 6 months. It shouldn't take another 6 months to do the same thing again. So templatizing or abstracting all of those complications is what we aim to solve. And finally, we want to increase speed or throughput. If you're able to train a model in half the time, then your throughput is doubled. If you're able to do that repetitively, then you can do experimentation on your model's outputs using processes that Hari, the previous speaker, also spoke about. So without further ado, I'm going to stop boring you with slides and hop right into the product demo. How do we do this? Well, this is Spike. It looks very simplistic, but that is by intent. Another software engineering principle we aim to embody is this engineering principle of abstraction, which is consolidating heavily complex architecture or knowledge spaces into very simplified interfaces. So an example of abstraction is simply, for example, opening up Google Maps on your phone. When you open up Google Maps, You don't care that somewhere at some point in time, someone needed to launch a satellite and take images of the planet and then stitch them all together for you to get the shortest path of going from here to the nearest McDonald's, for example. So that's abstraction, where you just care about travel time. All of that complexity is abstracted away. And really good software does that. That's what we want to do with Spike, which is all of this complexity that you saw on the slides earlier, having to choose between local compute and distributed compute, having to choose between what kind of processing infrastructure or logic you want to use. All of that should be not even an afterthought. It shouldn't be things that you're trying to solve as your primary problems. Your business problems should be your primary problems, and all of those should be abstracted away. This is the home page. This is exclusively set up for DAWS because we don't want to obviously connect over to enterprise customer data or like leak any information. So you can see it's a dev machine. So if there are any glitches, I'm going to blame the dev machine. We have a few data sets over here. Some of them are large, some of them are tiny. We'll take a look at a few of them. We can connect to most databases in the cloud. I say most because there's always going to be an edge case, but most of the popular databases that you see in cloud across Azure, AWS, GCP, wherever else, like if you have it in your on-prem data store as well, we can connect to most of them. And we aim to do that with most of our clients using a POC approach. Now let's just hop right in. Let's think back to what we're going to do, and now we'll take it as an interactive demo of that problem space that we're trying to solve. So we have this data set called video games ratings. I'm going to hop right in. And here you see one thing that happens the minute I click go, which is we get something called a data frame, we process it, and we store it. This is one of the most important stages in the entire pipeline, because right here in that simple button click, what our backend has done is it's grabbed this file, which used to be a CSV, and it's converted to a heavily efficient storage format. It's for the nerds on the call, I'm guessing everyone is one. You would be familiar with data formats such as Apache Parquet. It's columnar storage with some really cool hacks which involve reducing data storage. We made that claim earlier that it reduces storage cost by 90%. Let's see how. For those familiar with Parquet, this should be no surprise. But columnar storage, for those who don't know, is simply instead of storing flat files, which is if you have a CSV, you store it row by row. So each row needs to be read before you move on to the next one. Columnar storage stores files as blocks of files. Yeah, each block is simply a column. Now, when you open up, let's say Excel, right? And you have a bunch of information, let's say user ID. And if let's say you take a look at your Facebook user ID, it looks something like 100 some billion-ish something. Then you'll have something else, something. So both of these are integers, very long integers, but they're integers. The way you can store them is you either store them as this full integer itself, or let's say you have a huge row of these. You store some value that's logically in the middle somewhere. Let's say this is some value. And then you store an offset to that value, right? So this way, for integers itself, if you have a huge, like a billion users in your database, you don't need to store every single user ID. You just store one or a few indexes, and then you store offsets to those indexes, so your storage is reduced. Integers, this doesn't save that much storage, but it helps make processing faster through indexing. But let's say you have something like a string. Now, let's say here we have Singapore times 5 million or so population, whatever. And then you have the United States stored in your database times 350 million, or whatever the population of the United States is, or whatever the population of the United States on your app is. That's really inefficient, right? We all know how much storage single integer takes, something like 4 bytes or something. And we know how much a string takes. Strings are notoriously expensive to store. And that's where doing this index offsets helps save significant amounts of storage space. We base our file formats based on Apache Parquet, but we add our own syntactic sugar to make it a little bit faster for our own edge cases when we want to train machine learning models, for example. And this is where most of the storage efficiencies for the 90% compression and 90% increase in efficiencies for compute costs comes in. Because now that we've had this data set stored, we can really quickly iterate through this. And we can do some really cool things. Like, for example, if anyone's familiar with one-hot encoding, it's a process wherein, let's say you're Netflix and you have, 10 million users times, let's say 100,000 movies or something like that. You want each of those movies to represent a category. And that's pretty much impossible to do because that's like 100,000 categories of strings. That's not going to be very efficient. One-hot encoding is one way to represent this data where each movie feature is represented as a very long vector with only one and everything else 0. So each movie is a category in its own right, represented by this really long sparse vector, it's called. It can be dense as well, but it's sparse in our case. So we can run one-hot encoding on, let's say, publisher. And we run through it and we load it up. We have this wraparound data visualization because we also support nested features. And you can see the encoded publisher is thrown up over here. So now that's done. We can also do some cool things in the machine learning pipeline, such as plotting graphs. We can plot, let's say, just going to do a quick bar chart to show you what we want to do. It's just an example. Everyone's plotted charts in the past, so I'm not going to bore you too much with this. We deliberately have a limited set of visualizations over here as well as models because we want to keep this example simple. Most of our offerings are heavily customized to the customer that we're working with. So we can offer pretty much any visualization and any model that's available in the popular machine learning packages such as scikit-learn, TensorFlow, PyTorch, and what have you. Now, I'm conscious of time, so let's just hop right in very quickly to the main event, which is now that we have the storage very efficiently done in our backend, we can also run some really cool machine learning models on top of these. And this is where the abstraction really kicks in, where we have multiple backends, one for TensorFlow, one for PyTorch, one for scikit-learn, but with our own distributed architecture so that we don't run into the same inefficiencies that you would if you were doing it on your own machine, for example. And in our enterprise version, when we work with clients, we allow them to choose this, and we also allow them to activate it once it's trained. In the example of what we're going to do, let's consider k-means clustering. Now, k-means clustering simply is something like this. Imagine your Facebook, right? And you have all users over there. Human beings are really good at visualizing this connections. So that's essentially a graph where you might have some people who are interested in alcohol, some people who are interested in sports, some people who are interested in specific sports like Formula 1 and so on and so forth. So human beings are really good at visualizing these associations of people in their minds as clumps or groups of things in some space somewhere that are independent from each other, almost like tribes, as you see over here. Now, k-means isn't perfect as an algorithm to generate these, because if your groups are in space when they're embedded, they're not uniform or not perfect, then they can be imperfect themselves. But k-means is great for visualizing users, for visualizing other things that can be represented as clusters in space, such as digits, for example, which is what is shown over here. And we'll try to do our own here when we hop in. You can simply choose the feature columns that you want to throw into clustering. So for example, here we have sales, but let me just delete all sales. Let's just say other sales, global sales, credit count. Let me remove user count. So these are descriptive features in a set of dimensions that define what we would use to put people into different clusters. Now imagine in our Facebook example, you could have people who are viewing certain pages, people who are taking actions on certain pages, and those would be your features. When you click apply, we spin off a job to our backend cluster that is efficiently going to run this model for us. You can also choose to train multiple models in parallel at the same time for no extra cost, simply because we can. And we have a bunch of models that are trained over here. I'm going to click apply, header required, test2, and it's going to go. I have an example that's already run so that I don't waste your time. And here it is. You can see that we predict from all of the features that this row of a user has. Then cluster 0, because arrays begin at 0. Let's just go somewhere out here. It should be a 2 or a 1 somewhere else. Zero divides 0. Yeah. And there would be, okay, I'm just randomly clicking, but you get the point. You'll have users predicted as different clusters. In our enterprise version, we allow you at this point, instead of just throwing a plot out here, we would allow you to like activate it and click in to your existing infrastructure where you can push these models out live. And let's just take a recap very quickly. I'm conscious of time, but I don't know how much time we have, but like, let's just take a recap very quickly and see what we've covered, right? All of this complexity that you see in wanting to train a model that you would require heavy expertise in on each block, on each logical block, is now abstracted away into these very simplified point and click interfaces. That helps enterprises improve their throughput on training and deploying these machine learning models very quickly. You also learned that columnar storage and index storage, such as Parquet, helps you store data far more efficiently than CSVs. And finally, we saw that Spike allows you to train all of these models in parallel very quickly and very fast using state-of-the-art methods in our clusters in the backend. We support most models across TensorFlow, scikit-learn, PyTorch, and most other scientific packages. And we cater this very exclusively to what our clients need. So with that, I guess I'm out of time. I'll pause if there are any questions around this.
Hi. Okay, there's one question about the platform. Does it support GraphQL?
Sure. So GraphQL, yes, it does, but I think most of that would depend on like what you're trying to use it for.
Okay, so it does support GraphQL, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. I think that they will come up with their own reasons why they don't need to use GraphQL. Yeah, earlier you mentioned about the whole system itself is support CSV input files. Is there any other formats that it support other than CSV?
So I should apologize. Maybe I should make that a little bit more clear. So we support pretty much all major formats. We, as an example, are using CSV to visualize over here. But you can see we can connect to most databases. So it doesn't even need to be in a file format such as CSV. It could be somewhere in a MySQL DB in cloud, and we can read it in, and we can stream it in, even from like a PubSub stream or something like that. We have a stream set up somewhere that's going on. So we convert most things to a format that's similar to Parquet. And I was using CSV as an example where you store it because it's uncompressed, and then you take it into a format that is compressed.
Okay, so let me see. There's one more question. By the same person, I would like to get the transitive dependencies, like people you may need to know, people you may know feature in Facebook by considering the base node. So is that a probable feature in this particular product itself?
Gotcha. Okay, now I see the reason the person was asking for GraphQL.
Yeah, GraphQL, yes.
That's actually one of the cool projects we worked with a large, I don't know if I can name them, but a large marketplace here in Singapore. In essence, what you're trying to do is you have, so the question is basically you have nodes in a graph. So you have me, my friends, and their friends, and so on and so forth. And you'd like to get those associative feature hops, such as people you may know, topics you may like, and proximities scores between this node and other nodes or other topics related to the same node. We worked on a very cool project with one of our clients over here to do precisely this. Now, K-means is not a very good way to do this, but theoretically, in principle, that's what K-means does. It's a very bad example, but what you would try to do is you would create these clusters of cohorts, and then you would try to map them in higher space. Another way to think about doing this is a very simple cosine similarity or something, where you represent each node in this graph as a feature vector in its own right. Then you compute the angle between the vectors in multi-dimensional space. When you do this, it's a lot better than doing GraphQL queries, because GraphQL queries are mechanic and they're human input. They're not essentially statistically learned, so you don't get the scale of machine learning, you don't get the efficiencies, and it's not repetitive. So you use cosine similarity because in multidimensional space, if something is at a 90, then the cost of that angle becomes 0. If something is very close to each other, then the cost becomes like 1. And that's what you'd want to do.
Okay, one other question by an anonymous attendee regarding the import of data from a client side to this platform. Would the client need to pay the egress cost of the data flowing out from their platform, or is it being packaged altogether?
Very, very good question. So this is a good question because egress costs are the hidden, monkey in cloud, which will really whack you if you don't pay attention. And yes, in part. So we have versions of our software that run as containers across multi-cloud environments. So over there, we do the processing locally. And in most cases, we avoid egress costs. Where there are cases where clients might need like a unified, let's say, data lake that they're very particularly opinionated about having in one particular location or in one particular cloud provider somewhere, that is where having our approach where we initially perform a POC and we deploy this, which is, it can be considered as containers in their own environment, depending on how they want it. It helps us with that advantage where we can choose to customize our infrastructure and the local storage, processing, and transfer of data based on the cloud providers' cost models themselves. For example, if you look at GCP, right, they have really efficient file storage in GCS. So I forget what the name is, but it's very reliable, where you can essentially spin up a VM in under 30 seconds or so, and you can connect that to any data that you have as a blob, without even having to maintain something that's running all the time. We factor these assumptions into our cloud deployments, and we help customers essentially plan for this. There's always going to be a trade-off, so we put that forward. In most cases, the egress costs are like negligible, and they're packaged into the final pricing anyway. So even if it does go up, that's our problem. So yeah.
Okay. One question about your unique selling proposition compared to the competitors in the marketplace. I think this one is a bit of a tricky question. So how do you rate its level of user friendliness to new users?
It's a very good question. It's a business question. It's not technical. So I'll try to attempt to answer that. This market, as everybody knows, is if you consider simply the infrastructure, it is going to be $1 trillion market pretty soon. We're talking about cloud, analytics, and all that good stuff. And it's growing at a rate, even though it's so massive. You have companies like Microsoft who have literally bet the whole company on providing infrastructure as a service in the cloud. And it's growing at 25% or more every single year. And that's simply the infrastructure allocation. If you look at services on top of this, or career paths where you have the amount of data scientists growing by 76% employed year over year, it is significant. So there are competitors, but the pie is so large, even getting 1% of 1% of that is significant. So we understand that there are a lot of competitors in the market. And when we try to approach problem solving, we try to do it from a first principles approach, where we believe a few customers in the competitors in the market, I'm not going to name them, who provide functionality as a service, where it is, hey, use our tool, plug it in, it's this layer on top, it just works. We provide the in-house capabilities of this expertise that you don't really need to ever see. Where if you want to train very complex neural networks, we help you understand what they are, make it repeatable and scalable. If you want to train something that's simple and you want to give all of your analysts the tools to succeed without having your data science team swamped by a bunch of trivial questions, it fulfills that role as well. So these capabilities at scale is what we see as being a differentiator, one of the differentiators. I'm not going to give away the secret sauce like everything else, obviously, but you can see, as your throughput increases, even if you manage to reduce the amount of time that you're shipping a model now by half, you're able to double your work. We see significantly higher improvements where models that used to take 3 months to 6 months get trained in 20 minutes flat. That's the k-means clustering model that we were looking at. So 20 minutes over 6 months, significant improvement in throughput. And that's what we see as a difference.
Okay, I think we have one final question because we're gonna be running out of time. So can this be applied to a non-e-commerce platform, right? Because e-commerce definitely there's lots and lots of data, but can it be applicable to non-e-commerce platform? Is there any customers that use it for some other system for analytics?
Absolutely. So again, we simply provide statistical models and data science pipelines and analytical drill down techniques as a service. And you can see any industry on the planet today. I would be surprised if there is not an industry out there that would not benefit from these techniques. So because we approach this from a first principles approach, it's all about using these tools that are, again, just a means to an end to solve common problems in the industry. So from my time in the industry, what I've seen is, k-means clustering can be used for one specific set of niche use cases, but there are very creative ways to use it. For example, the first question that asked about how do you hop across a graph across multiple nodes? You can do some creative things like clustering topics using k-means and then using that as higher level space to do something like even a dumb a regression model on top of to map categories across. So there's only imagination is the restriction over here. What we choose to do in our enterprise version is offer those examples that can show you, how you can use k-means to solve a problem. It's not necessarily used only in this space, but it can be used across. If anyone's interested in wanting to learn more, we do this all the time. Please reach out to us at Sparkline, hit us up, and we're happy to help.
Yep. So among the questions itself, which is your favorite? We need to pick a winner of the 4 questions out there. Yeah.
Interesting. So I would pick
there's one on the GraphQL regarding Facebook and the unique selling proposition application to the non-e-commerce platform itself. Yeah.
I would actually pick the application of non-e-commerce platforms.
Okay, Okay, that's good. That's good. So I think that's all for the question itself. Thanks to all the speakers that is involved into today's DAWS meetup for June itself. Thanks for the first speaker, Quinn from Meiro, talking about measuring ROI on a customer-centric initiative. Secondly, we have our very own Hari from eClerx Digital, talking about digital experimentation framework and program maturity model. And of course, Sparkline from AK doing the Spike demo itself. So all good, and I love all the demos and the presentation. Really, there's quite some tough questions, especially for Hari from all the other speakers. Thanks everyone for attending, and I would like to thank our sponsors again: Decision Science, eClerx Digital, Happy Marketer, Meiro, and Sparkline. So, John, do you have any other questions? Anything else to say?
I think just like we say, thank you to all speakers again. And thank you everyone, even the participants, for actually taking time off your Wednesday to actually join us and hear and learn what the industry is really doing. So thank you guys. So we'll see you in next month edition. See you guys.
See you. Thanks a lot. Thanks everyone.
Guys.
Thank you.
Catch you next month.
Thank you, Iki.